The following recording is a reading from the abridged notes of a lecture given by Manly P. Hall on May the 9th, 1928, at the San Francisco Scottish Rite Masonic Center Auditorium. Presented by the Philosophical Research Society, Los Angeles, California.
Broadly speaking, in philosophy, there are two methods or forms of thinking, the speculative and the operative. Speculative philosophy is a philosophy of notions and perceptions, the cataloging of mental reactions and conclusions of so-called facts. Operative philosophy is the philosophy of life and exact causes. Philosophy deals with the relationships between causes and their effects. It is the science of life. In philosophy, both religion and science find a place. For philosophy is religion and science, the three making the one, or unity. Philosophy knows no limit to thinking. It is the all-inclusive science of life. Philosophy is not religious, but the philosopher is the greatest religious person in the world. You see, philosophy deals with activity and the cause of actions, thinking and the cause of thinking. Cause is synonymous with deity and is the common denominator. It is the very body of science and religion. Philosophy adds stability to thinking. A religion that is not philosophical is not rational. Science and religion are poles of thinking. Religion and science are not the complete body of thought. They are extremes, the work of ages, equaling the ages themselves. Religion is fanatical, being the uncontrolled emotional attitude. Philosophy is not primarily concerned with attitudes. The cross of materialism, the cross of fanaticism, these are the two thieves on the cross of philosophy, because the key to the ideal of philosophy is the thing which links thoughts together, working from the two ends or opposites. It goes to the middle. Philosophy suggests that science be made a religion, and that religion be made a science. Seek of all good things, not too much. Too much of a thing is an excess of good. Moderation is very important. Philosophy represents the moderative power of thinking. It represents the control of the methods which are now being tried. So, philosophy represents mental maturity. The popular conception of philosophy is that the philosophers were beings a bit diminutive, who often stood in the way of their own learning. You know how the philosopher is supposed to look. He's pictured as a very ancient man with a long flowing beard. You've probably seen pictures of him in the books. A great deal of propping is required to hold up a mistake. This is true of our greatest institutions. The universe is fitted to fit the mistake. In China, the gates are built top-heavy, with a heavy crosspiece supported by two slender uprights, so that many props are required to hold up the gate. There are so many props to hold up the gate that the main supports are lost sight of in a forest of props. Now science is the same, in that it gives the same effect of many props. So many props are propped up on the props that we cannot get at the original structure. We have leaning minds that are tilted against various objects that we're trying to prop up. We're trying to prove that the man who did it knew. You know, the scholastics, or scholasticism, for example, working after the method of Aristotle, thought that they thought. They arrive at conclusions first and prove it afterward. For example, if they advanced the conclusion that the soul was black and white striped, then black and white striped it was. and they spent the rest of their lives proving it. They argued, debated, and analyzed. The soul was either black or white, or both black and white, that there were more black stripes than white, or more white stripes than black, and spent their lives proving their arguments. The result was that during 400 years, Europe did not have a new thought. They spent their lives in proving the conclusions of their own analyses. The Galilean or Galileo system of astronomy was not much liked. Ptolemy was, according to them, Bruno, they wanted to prove that the earth was all there was. Philosophy in those days must be made to fit into things as they were. Theirs was the heresy of philosophy. It was Sir Francis Bacon who attacked the scholastic school and tore it to shreds. Knowledge was a slow science. The scholastics made a sermon of a word. They would take a word, say the word art, then trace it back to the pale of the arts, and then back so far that they couldn't find any arts. They took the words of Aristotle and picked them to the bone, and then they picked the bones. Sir Francis Bacon swept the whole fabric away, introducing the undiscovered mind to the human mind. The human mind has two given ways of thinking, two guises of thinking: observation, authority, and experimentation, or experience. Authority is a living story according to philosophical data. Francis Bacon said, "Things are as we see them. Examine them and learn what they are." It is dangerous to examine. It's heresy to look into the things of life as they are, because they might differ from authority. Observation is not enough. Things are not what they seem to be. Looking deceives, at least part of the time. Experimentation is the second method. If you could prove a thing by experimenting, you could prove its existence. This is the great key to the Baconian system of thinking. Compare this statement: "We all go back sometime, it must be so," with Bacon's statement: "What we actually know is very little in comparison to the structure of our learning." There was a very great difference between calling it that which was actually known and separating that from what was believed. Bacon's mind synthesized. His great dictionary, his French encyclopedia, is his monument. His French encyclopedia is the beginning of the classification of knowledge. Philosophy has ceased to be philosophy. We have 100 or 200 schools of philosophy, of as narrow an orthodoxy as we have in religion and science. The real philosophy of the sages is dead. So many sects prove that. There's no philosophy today, for today it cuts the body to pieces. In Christianity we have 125 different segments. Wisdom died when science, religion, and philosophy were separated. Only one kind of knowledge can exist. Facts are facts. The moment we have 4 or 5 kinds of wisdom, we have no wisdom at all. God himself could not pick out one of the boundaries. The isms are the labyrinth of human beings. There are so many isms, we can't investigate them all. There are too many of them. In a lifetime, we could not cover them all. The philosophy of conclusions represents what is being thought about philosophy. This means notions. The idealistic versus the realistic. Modern philosophy is decadent. Its method is to tear down, to disprove by tearing down the conceits of other philosophers. The structure of real philosophy, as a synthesized science, is good. No being knows what is right, so we must study everything that is rightness, that is philosophy. We must ask the question of Pilate: what is truth? We are never doomed to disappointment as with Pilate. We know more about truth than Pilate. No people have the same answer of the same thought. We have a mass of perfected isms, or ologies. What we most need is philosophically something synthetic, something that is really a binding element in life, an element with the power to unite in mutual understanding. Man's life is becoming more complicated. The necessities of life are becoming more difficult to obtain, and it's more difficult to understand life. The desire is growing to know how, what, and where. Men desire to know why they're here and how they can live the best. Philosophy is the only answer, because it's an understanding of the principle of living. It's an understanding of the principle of balance. There are many unbalanced methods of education. Theology gives one example. Theology explains life to mankind in something of this manner, that the more miserable he was, then the happier he would be sometime. Life is presumed to be a span of tribulation. If you agreed with theology before you died, you'd be saved from the devil and be delivered out of the depths of hell. Well, theology is similar to an asbestos passport. Heaven was a beautiful place, filled with saints, martyrs, and angels. God has made the earth just as unpleasant a place as possible. This was shown in the ship drama we played during the Protestant Reform in England. This is what theology offers to the world's great cry to know. The Mayflower is a tremendous comparison. The Pilgrims and their methods is the same old story over again. The tendency of man to seek freedom for his beliefs, and having obtained it, to persecute those who do not believe just as he does. The need of philosophy in theology is illustrated by this. Dogmatic science is just as successful as theology during the Dark Ages. No science can be any bigger than the person that represents it. No individual becomes any bigger because of a change of faith. He will only make narrow the thing he takes up because he himself is narrow. The rolling stone has nothing to do with the thing you believe. An illustration of these methods of theology is found in the modern world in the methods of the AMA, School of Medicine, just a few years ago, and their attitude toward the chiropractors, osteopaths, and so forth. Those who understand are always in the minority. So it's something to be big in each narrow organization and act as an adversary to a little organization. Science has, to a great degree, exhausted its possibilities. The scientist will find more facts, but he'll never find the cause. The one thing in the universe he wants to know, the origin of intelligence and life, will never be found or discovered. True science is nearer conquering, but is incapable of giving itself or anyone else what it seeks unless it has philosophy. Dogmatic science does not understand the man who understands and dreams. Dr. Millikan had his sanity questioned because he believed in a God. You see, science is not established on the ancient premises of a God, being the only one and an intelligent deity. Every great scientist, the moment he begins to understand what he is, commences to create. He creates because he becomes a philosopher. You would not think that Durant's Story of Philosophy is the most popular book of philosophy in the schools. It's the first time that the story of philosophy was brought down to the level of the public. The establishment of true thinking, of the reasoning thinking, gives surprises and represent the principles of the various divisions of religion and science. Philosophy is the masterly expression in life. Religion has its place in philosophy. The findings of science are necessary to the structure of philosophy. They are useless when isolated, being but themselves good when united. Philosophy rules results. Theology is suffering from internal decay. And physically, the thinking theologian is getting as far away from his theology as possible. Our thinking today is mostly based upon superstition. People still preserve the old superstitions. The fabric of philosophy, 1,000 years from now, will represent a world or wheel where tomorrow ever becomes tomorrow, and today fades into yesterday, into a world somewhere in the great vistas of tomorrow, a philosophy ruling men kindly by law and order, by understanding. The greatest religions of the world are philosophies. Our Confucianism, for example, is not a religion and never was. It's a great system of moral ethics, and it saved China with her hundreds of millions. Buddhism is not a religion, but a code of ethical philosophy. You know, Buddha was believed to have been an atheist. Buddha became the greatest moral impulse to the good that the world has ever known. 2/3 of the world was converted to Buddhism. His system of moral philosophy was a system of ethical philosophy. He showed men why he should do the good. Considering the time of the history and ethics, the step is 2,000 years ahead of the race. The world cannot be ruled by philosophy until the world can recognize philosophy. The problem of philosophy ruling the world is an enormous problem. This problem is taken up in Bacon's Atlantis and More's Utopia. There the story is told. Every so often, the nations of the earth tear themselves to pieces from lack of philosophy. The curse increases according to the civilization of the people. Individuals have been educated and thus are dangerous to themselves and to their communities. The educational system of today plays into the hand of the individual, giving him the means to destroy the wisest thing that exists. As a result, we have murderers, thieves, anarchists. Education today lacks philosophy. The mysteries were a philosophical dissertation. Education today lacks an ethical turn. The education of today is like handing an individual dynamite without telling him it is dangerous. Our actions tell him that the worse he does with it, the better it will be for him personally. Everything we do contradicts every good we do and think. When philosophy will rule the world, it's looking forward to the Renaissance of the Golden Age. The world should have some place where the great treasure of the world can be preserved for the generations of the future. There should be some place where these things which are priceless, things which are in the British and other museums, and which simply cannot be replaced, could be put and kept safely from the destruction which is always threatened by wars and warring nations. If we could have but a tiny spot where we could do this, where it ought to be done, it could be a sure and safe spot where we could develop what we call a world culture, a universal person. A mile or two of land on a great continent, the piece of land to become the possession of man, no man, but all men. And upon that continent, that little area belonging to no race and to no nation, for the laws of men are but proved selfishness. In this area, which belongs to no man, but to all men, do what the ancient mysteries did. In these buildings that should be raised from the site, store that knowledge which belongs to all. No one has it. No one conquers anything because it belongs to all men. So gradually, that which is imperative to the ages would be gathered and put upon the neutral basis of the future ages. Anyone who is upon that piece of land as a teacher should be a citizen of no race and no land, only of the great area of that sanctuary. Establish upon the continent of the earth these centers of universal knowledge for the pilgrims of the future, where they might come and be dedicated by its knowledge. This is the key to the establishment of philosophy in the ancient world. The philosopher should return as a representative part of human knowledge. Philosophy has no recognition as a great form of learning. It can be made a universal form of learning if recognition is given to it as a system of thinking. If philosophy is to survive in the present day and age, we must find it. If we are to survive in the present day and age, we must include it. The system of today is to do that which pays best. The great philosophy of today is that of a public, popular recognition and acclamation. Philosophy is the foundation forming institutions of intellectual understanding. This is the treasure that the world is storing up. We ourselves are worlds, each a world, and all of us should set aside in ourselves a place, and there put the things that are valuable, an area of consciousness, keeping it, culling it from our center of perceptions, and keeping it closed from our sense perceptions, and keep it in a place for the storing up for that which is necessary for our ethical, intellectual, and spiritual evolution. Building a great university of life, university of wisdom, spreading out beyond its boundaries, our center of learning in ourselves. We, as an individual, a living temple of thought and right knowing, are one point in the empire of which we are part. One place where these treasures are safe for all in our own minds and hearts. The development of that which is true building philosophically into ourselves of the fabric of everything, because we are part of everything. This principle in the human mind is the foundation for right thinking, right knowing, right action. The human genus emerging from earth to the superstructure, the foundation for the reintegration of philosophy, religion, and science. A golden age when philosophy will rule the world.